My name's Emma Wilson, and I'm 52 years old, and I got a call last Thursday that turned my whole world upside down. I was in London, working on a deal for a Canadian logistics company, and I've been a commercial property negotiator based out of Halifax for 23 years. And I'm good at my job because I'm patient, and I notice details others miss. But I never thought I'd need those skills for my own marriage until that moment. I was 4 days into my trip, sitting in my hotel room, going over contract drafts when my phone rang, and it was Liam, my husband of 15 years. And before I could even say hello, he just blurted it out. "I'm divorcing you, Emma, and I've sold our beach house to start over with Sophie." He laughed through the phone like it was some kind of joke, and I felt my stomach drop. But I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just gripped the phone tighter and said, "I understand because that's what I do. I stay calm under pressure." Liam kept talking like he'd rehearsed it, and his voice had this smug confidence I'd never heard before. "Sophie and I need a fresh start," he said, and I could picture him standing in our kitchen in Halifax, probably sipping that overpriced coffee he loves. The beach house sold for a great price, and I signed the papers yesterday. Sophie Bennett's been his personal trainer for the last 18 months, a 34-year-old who wears designer gym clothes she can't afford, and once asked me how much my laptop cost. Like it was casual small talk. I didn't slam the desk, didn't raise my voice, I just asked, "When did you close the sale?" And he said, "Yesterday," sounding almost annoyed that I wasn't falling apart. "Buyer's moving in next week, and I figured you're always traveling, so you can just stay at the Marriott when you get back." That's when I realized he thought I'd just roll over and accept it, like I was some predictable pushover who'd let him walk away with everything we'd built. I hung up and sat there staring at my laptop for a good 20 minutes, feeling this mix of shock and anger boiling up inside me, but I didn't let it take over, because I've spent decades in this business, and I know how to protect what's mine. Liam didn't know me at all if he thought I'd just let this go. Our beach house in Halifax, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, with a deck overlooking the Atlantic, cost $1,400,000. Almost all my savings plus a mortgage, and I'd spent years fixing it up, replacing the siding, upgrading the kitchen, while Liam threw parties and called it our forever home. He thought he could sell it out from under me, but he missed one critical detail. I'd put that house in a living trust 11 months ago, buried in some refinancing paperwork for a rental property we own in Dartmouth. Liam signed everything without reading, too busy scrolling his phone, and I never brought it up again because I'd started noticing things over the past 2 years that made me uneasy. It started small, like Liam stopped asking about my work or joining me on trips abroad, and his texts got short and cold. Just, "Safe travels," or "Have a good meeting," with no warmth. No, "I miss you." Then he got obsessed with the gym training with Sophie 5 days a week, and I supported it at first because I thought he was just getting healthy, but then I saw charges on our credit card for dinners I wasn't at and weekend trips with friends I'd never heard of. I didn't hire a private investigator or track his phone like some of my colleagues did when their marriages fell apart. I just watched and waited and quietly prepared for what I knew was coming. That trust was my insurance, and now it was my lifeline. I pulled myself together, opened my laptop, and started typing 2 emails, one to Noah Carter, my lawyer for over a decade, and one to Olivia Fraser, my title agent, who saved my deals more times than I can count. The subject line was "Urgent, Fraudulent Property Sale Attempt," and I laid it all out. Liam's call, the supposed sale, the fact that the house is in my trust and he has no legal right to sell it. I attached a scanned copy of the trust deed, which I always carry with me, because early in my career, a client tried to screw me over with fake paperwork, and I learned to never travel without my documents. The deed clearly showed the Halifax property in the Emma Wilson Living Trust with me, as the sole trustee, and Liam had no claim to it. After I hit send, I called Noah, and he picked up on the second ring, even though it was late in Halifax. I told him everything, and he didn't hesitate. He can't sell what he doesn't own. "Emma, any sale he's initiated is fraudulent, and the buyers have no legal claim." He said he'd contact the Halifax Land Registry to flag any attempted transfers and notify local title companies to stop the sale in its tracks. I felt this rush of clarity, like the fog was lifting, And I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was in control. Noah warned me that Liam's actions could be criminal fraud, but I didn't want to go there yet. Not because I cared about him, but because I didn't want this to drag on with court hearings and police reports. I just wanted my house back. I sat back in my chair, and for the first time since the call, I let myself feel the anger, not just at Liam, but at Sophie too, because this wasn't just about him leaving me, it was the way they laughed about it, like my life was a punchline. I thought about our 15 years together, how we met at a real estate conference in Toronto, how he charmed me with his quick wit and ambition, how we got married at a Halifax courthouse with just my sister and his cousin there. I poured everything into that marriage and that house, and they thought they could take it all, because I was halfway across the world. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I booked a flight back to Halifax for the next morning because I wasn't going to handle this from a hotel room 5,000 miles away. I sent a quick text to my London client, saying a family emergency came up and I'd follow up remotely, and then I started packing. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, but because I was focused going over every detail in my head, every contract clause, every legal angle. By the time I boarded the plane, I wasn't the shocked wife anymore. I was the negotiator who'd closed million-dollar deals, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. This wasn't about revenge. It was about setting things right, and Liam was about to learn that signatures matter more than intentions. I'm sitting on this plane, flying back to Halifax from London, and my head's spinning, because I can't stop thinking about how I got here, how 15 years of marriage just crumbled into this mess. I met Liam Murray 16 years ago at a real estate conference in Toronto, and I was 36, just starting to make a name for myself as a commercial property negotiator, and he was this charming guy working for a property development firm, all sharp suits and quick smiles. He walked up to me during a coffee break, asked about my work, and by the end of the conversation, I was laughing harder than I had in months. We clicked instantly, and within a year, we were married at a Halifax courthouse, just my sister Ava and his cousin Ryan there. No big ceremony, because we were both too busy building our careers. I was impressed by Liam's ambition, his ability to talk anyone into anything, and I thought we'd be unstoppable together. 3 years later, we bought the beach house in Halifax, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a big deck with an unobstructed view of the Atlantic, and it cost $1,400,000, almost every penny I'd saved, plus a hefty mortgage. I'd spend weekends fixing it up, replacing rotted deck boards, upgrading the kitchen, installing new windows, while Liam invited friends over for barbecues and called it our forever place. I believed him, and for a good decade, we made it work. I was traveling a lot, closing deals in Europe, Asia, sometimes South America, and Liam started his own consulting business, which gave him flexibility, so he'd join me on some trips. We'd turn my work trips into long weekends in Paris or Tokyo, staying up late, drinking wine, talking about our plans, and I thought we were solid, or at least as solid as 2 people with demanding careers could be. But about 2 years ago, things started to shift, and it wasn't one big moment, just a slow drip of changes that I didn't want to admit were happening. Liam stopped asking about my work, stopped caring about the deals I was proud of, and he'd brush off my invitations to join me abroad, saying he was too busy with clients. His texts got shorter, just, "Have a good trip," or, "Let me know when you land," and I'd stare at my phone waiting for the, "I miss you" that never came. Then he got this gym membership and started training 5 days a week with Sophie, a former varsity athlete turned personal trainer who was all energy and confidence. At first I was happy for him because he seemed motivated and I'd always encouraged him to take care of himself. But then he'd talk about Sophie all the time, how she pushed him, how she had this unique approach to fitness, and I'd nod along, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. It wasn't just Sophie, though, it was the money too. And I started seeing charges on our joint credit card for things that didn't add up, like $200 dinners in Halifax when I was in Vancouver, or weekend spa trips with friends never met. One time I asked him about a $500 charge at a boutique hotel in Charlottetown, and he said it was a client retreat, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine, and I knew he was lying. I didn't confront him, didn't go through his phone, or hire someone to follow him, like some of my divorced colleagues did, because I wasn't ready to face it, but I wasn't naive either. I started paying closer attention, keeping mental notes of every inconsistency, every excuse, and I knew something was coming. I just didn't know how bad it would be. 11 months ago, I made a move that saved me, and I didn't even realize how important it would be at the time. I was refinancing a rental property we owned in Dartmouth, and I had my lawyer, Noah Carter, draw up some extra paperwork to transfer the beach house into a living trust with me as the sole trustee. I buried it in a stack of documents, told Liam it was just routine stuff to protect our assets, and he signed everything without even glancing at it, too busy texting someone with a smile I hadn't seen in years. I didn't lie when I said it would protect us, but I meant it would protect me, because my instincts had been screaming for months that Liam was slipping away, and I'd spent my career learning how to secure what's mine. I never mentioned the trust again, just filed the papers, and kept the deed in my briefcase, which I always carry because in my line of work you don't leave anything to chance. Looking back, I can see how deliberate it all was, not just Liam pulling away, but the way he and Sophie were building something behind my back. It wasn't just an affair, it was a plan, and I missed it because I was too busy closing deals and trying to hold our marriage together. About 6 months ago, Liam started dropping hints about selling the beach house, saying we didn't need it anymore, that we could downsize and invest the money elsewhere, and I'd shut it down every time, because that house was my anchor. A thing I'd poured my heart into. He'd get this annoyed look like I was being unreasonable. But now I know he was already scheming with Sophie, probably thinking they could cash out and start over without me ever suspecting. Sitting on this plane, I feel the anger bubbling up again, not just at Liam for betraying me, but at myself for not seeing it sooner, because the signs were all there. The late-night phone calls he'd take in the garage, the way Sophie would show up at our house for training sessions in clothes that looked more like a date than a workout, the way Liam stopped touching me, stopped looking at me like I mattered. I'm not the kind of person who falls apart, though, and as the plane starts its descent into Halifax, I feel that clarity coming back, the same focus I had when I sent those emails to Noah and Olivia. This isn't just about a house anymore. It's about everything I've built, and I'm not letting Liam and Sophie take it from me. They thought they could outsmart me, thought I'd crumble when they dropped their little bombshell, but they don't know the woman they're dealing with, and I'm ready to show them exactly how wrong they are. I landed in Halifax Saturday morning and didn't waste a second because I wasn't about to let Liam and Sophie think they'd won. I rented a car at the airport and drove straight to Noah Carter's office because he's been my lawyer for over a decade, and if anyone could shut this down, it was him. My head was still spinning from the flight from London, and the call from Liam telling me he'd sold our beach house and was leaving me for Sophie, but I wasn't falling apart. I was focused and ready to fight. Noah was waiting for me in his office, even though it was the weekend, and the place was dead quiet. No paralegals, no assistants, just him with a stack of papers and a serious look on his face. I sat down and told him everything: Liam's call, the supposed sale, Sophie's smug laugh through the phone, and Noah just nodded like he'd seen this 100 times before. He pulled out his laptop and started typing while I talked, and then he said exactly what I needed to hear. Liam can't sell that house, Emma. It's in your living trust and you're the sole trustee, so any sale he's trying to push through is fraudulent and legally void. I felt this wave of relief, but it was mixed with anger, because Liam thought he could just take what I'd spent years building and walk away with Sophie like I wouldn't notice. Noah said he'd already contacted the Halifax Land Registry after my email from London, and they'd flagged any attempted transfers on the property, so no title company in their right mind would touch this deal now. He leaned back and added, "What Liam's done here isn't just shady, it's criminal fraud, and depending on how far he's gone, there could be charges." I didn't want Liam in jail, not out of love, but because I didn't want this dragging on with court dates and headlines. I just wanted my house back, and for them to face the consequences of thinking they could outsmart me. I asked Noah to keep digging, to find out who the buyer was and what exactly Liam had told them, because something about this felt bigger than just a quick sale. While he made some calls, I pulled out my laptop and logged into our joint bank account because I had a bad feeling and I was right. My heart sank when I saw it. Liam had transferred $180,000 out of our savings over the past 6 months in chunks small enough to avoid my notice, but big enough to hurt, and most of it went to an account I didn't recognize. I showed Noah the statements, and he shook his head and said, "This isn't just an affair, Emma. This is calculated. They're planning something." I felt sick, not just because of the money, but because I realized Liam hadn't just been cheating. He'd been stealing from me, from us, for months, maybe longer. Noah got off the phone with Olivia Fraser, my title agent who'd been working with me forever, and she'd found something that made my blood run cold. The buyer for the beach house wasn't some random person. It was a shell company owned by Ethan Bennett, Sophie's older brother, who runs a sketchy real estate flipping business out of Dartmouth. Olivia said the offer was way below market value, like they were trying to snatch the house cheap and flip it for a huge profit after I was forced to negotiate or give up. I sat there gripping the edge of Noah's desk because it hit me that this wasn't just Liam wanting a new life with Sophie. This was a scheme, a deliberate plan to rip me off and leave me with nothing. I felt the anger boiling up again, but I didn't let it take over because I've closed too many deals under pressure to lose my head now. Noah handed me a folder with more documents, and I started flipping through them, and that's when I saw something that made my stomach twist. There were preliminary lease agreements for a fitness studio in Bedford, signed by Liam and Sophie 3 months ago, with our joint savings listed as the startup capital. They weren't just trying to sell my house. They were using my money to fund their new life, their new business, like I was some kind of silent investor who'd never find out. I looked at Noah and said, "They've been planning this for months, using my money, my house, my life, to bankroll their future." He nodded and said, "We've got them, Emma. The trust protects the house, and these transfers give us leverage, because moving that much money without your consent is theft, plain and simple." I took a deep breath and felt this shift inside me, like the shock was fading, and I was stepping into the driver's seat. I told Noah to freeze our joint accounts to stop any more transfers and to send a formal notice to Ethan Bennett's company that the sale was null and void. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was strategizing like I do in my job, finding the pressure points that would make Liam and Sophie realize they'd picked the wrong person to mess with. Noah warned me that Liam might try to fight this in court, but with the trust deed and the bank records, we were in a strong position, and he didn't think it would go that far. I nodded and said, "Let's make it clear to them that this stops now, no negotiations, no second chances." As I left Noah's office, I felt this strange calm settling over me, not because I wasn't angry, but because I knew I had the upper hand. I drove to a coffee shop nearby and called Olivia to thank her for catching the shell company, and she said she'd keep digging into Ethan's records in case there was more to this. Sitting there with my coffee, I realized this wasn't just about protecting my house anymore. It was about holding Liam and Sophie accountable for thinking they could erase 15 years of my life with a phone call and a fake sale. I wasn't going to yell or beg or try to fix what was broken. I was going to enforce the contracts they didn't bother to read, and that's when I decided I wasn't telling Liam. I was back in Halifax yet, because I wanted to see what they were doing in my house, with my money, thinking they'd already won. I didn't tell Liam I was back in Halifax, because I wanted to catch him off guard and see what he and Sophie were doing in my house, thinking they'd already pulled off their scam. It was Saturday afternoon when I pulled into the driveway of our beach house and saw a red SUV parked, where I usually park, and I knew it was Sophie's because I'd seen her driving it to our house for those so-called training sessions. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't nervous. I was ready, because after everything I'd learned from Noah and Olivia about the shell company and the $180,000 Liam stole from our savings, I wasn't just fighting for my dead house, I was fighting for my life. I grabbed my briefcase with the trust deed and bank records and walked up to the front door, which was unlocked, like they didn't even care who might show up. I could hear laughter from the kitchen, Liam's voice mixed with Sophie's, and they were talking about renovations like they already owned the place, saying things like, knock down this wall for an open concept, and beach properties sell better. With modern vibes, I set my suitcase down quietly and walked toward the voices, feeling this mix of anger and disgust because they were standing in my kitchen, planning their future with my money. Liam was leaning against the island holding a beer, and Sophie was next to him in a tight dress holding a glass of wine, and they both froze when I stepped into the room. Liam's smile dropped for a second before he tried to play it cool and said, "Emma, I didn't expect you back until Monday." And Sophie gave this nervous laugh and looked away like she knew she was caught. I didn't smile, didn't play nice, just looked at Liam and said, "Clearly," and then glanced at Sophie, who at least had the sense to step back from him. Liam tried to act casual, saying, "This is awkward. Maybe Sophie should go." But I cut him off and said, "No, she stays because this involves her too." Liam's face hardened, and he said, "We don't need to make this messy, Emma. I've been unhappy for a long time, and we both deserve a fresh start." I nodded like I agreed. But then I set my briefcase on the counter, opened it, and pulled out the trust deed, and said I agree completely. Which is why I've already talked to Noah Carter about the fraudulent sale you tried to pull. Liam's eyes widened, and Sophie looked confused, like she didn't know what was happening. I held up the deed and said, "This house isn't yours to sell, Liam. It's been in the Emma Wilson Living Trust for almost a year, and I'm the sole trustee." Sophie turned to Liam and said, "You told me the sale was final," and he snapped back. It was, but I could see the panic creeping into his face. I slid the trust documents across the counter and said, "Check the deed, Liam. You signed the transfer papers last May, with the refinancing stuff for our Dartmouth property. Remember how you didn't bother to read them?" He grabbed the papers and I started flipping through them, and I watched his hands shake because he knew I wasn't bluffing. I kept going calm but firm, saying, "The sale you tried to push through is null and void, and the buyer's already been notified." Sophie's face went pale, and she muttered, "I'll wait outside," and started for the door. But I stopped her and said, "You might want to hear this because your brother Ethan's shell company is tied up in this mess too." She froze, and Liam looked like he'd been punched because they thought they'd kept that part hidden. I pulled out the bank statements Noah had sent me and said, "While you were busy signing fake sale papers, you also moved $180,000 from our joint savings to an account I don't have access to and used some of it to fund your little fitness studio in Bedford." Liam tried to interrupt, saying, "That's not how it works, Emma." But I cut him off and said, "It's exactly how it works, and it's called theft." Sophie's eyes darted to Liam like she was realizing he'd dragged her into something bigger than she expected. And I felt this rush of satisfaction because their confidence was crumbling right in front of me. I kept my voice steady and said, "You thought you could sell my house and walk away with my money, but you forgot who I am, Liam. I've spent 23 years negotiating deals and reading fine print, and I don't lose what's mine." Liam tried a different angle, his voice softer now, saying, "Emma, let's be reasonable. We can split the money from the house and move on. No lawyers, no drama." I almost laughed because he still thought he could talk his way out of this, but I shook my head and said, "There are already lawyers involved, Liam, and not just mine because Ethan's company is looking at fraud charges for trying to buy a property you don't own." Sophie gasped and said, "You can't do that." And I looked at her and said, "I'm not doing anything. I'm just enforcing the law, and what happens next depends on you two." Liam's face turned red and he shouted, "You tricked me into signing those trust papers," and I corrected him, saying, "No, I protected my assets, which is what anyone in my job would do. You chose not to read what you signed, and that's on you." Sophie tried to jump in, saying, "Emma, we can work this out," but I held up my hand and said, "The time for working things out was before you tried to steal my house and my savings." I gathered my papers and said, "I'm staying at the Westin downtown tonight to give you space. But let me be clear, this house isn't being sold, and I'm moving back in tomorrow." I looked at Liam and added, "Noah's preparing a settlement offer. You return $100,000 of the money you took and walk away from the house, or we go to court and you both face fraud charges." Liam started to say something, but I turned and walked out because I was done listening to his excuses. As I got in my car, I heard Sophie's voice yelling something at Liam, but I didn't care because for the first time since that phone call in London, I felt like I was in control and they were the ones scrambling. Sunday morning, I was up early at the Westin downtown Halifax because I wasn't going to sit around waiting for Liam and Sophie to make their next move after I dropped that bombshell in the kitchen yesterday. I called Noah Carter, my lawyer, and told him I wanted to push the settlement offer hard because I was done with this game and ready to end it clean. Noah said he'd heard from Liam's lawyer overnight, and they were rattled, especially after I brought up Ethan Bennett's shell company and the $180,000 Liam moved from our savings. I felt this mix of anger and relief because they were finally realizing they couldn't just walk over me, but I wasn't celebrating. I just wanted it over. Noah had the settlement drafted. Liam returns $100,000 of the stolen money, gives up any claim to the beach house, and I let him and Sophie keep their fitness studio without dragging them into court for fraud. It was fair but firm, and I knew they'd take it because the evidence was stacked against them. I drove to Noah's office and we went over the paperwork line by line because I've learned in 23 years of negotiating deals that you don't sign anything without reading every word. Noah showed me a new document, an affidavit from Ethan Bennett, admitting his company's offer on the house was based on Liam's false claim of ownership, and that hit me hard because it was proof this wasn't just a mistake, it was a calculated, I planned to screw me over. I felt that old anger flare up, but I pushed it down and focused because I was so close to ending this. Noah said he'd filed an emergency motion with the Halifax court to block any property transfers, and by Monday morning it was official. Liam couldn't touch the house, even if he tried something desperate. I nodded and told Noah to send the settlement offer to Liam's lawyer with a 48-hour deadline because I wasn't giving them room to stall. While Noah handled the legal side, I went to the bank and met with Sarah Mitchell, a branch manager I'd worked with on property deals years ago. I showed her the bank statements, and within an hour, we'd frozen the joint accounts, separated my personal funds, and canceled every automatic payment tied to Liam, including the $250 monthly charge to Sophie's gym that had he been running for over a year. Sarah looked at me as we finished and said, "Anything else Emma and I just said, make sure nothing else slips through because I was done letting Liam touch what was mine." By noon, I'd updated my credit cards, notified my company's HR about changes to my benefits, and called our insurance agent to remove Liam from our policies. It was like untangling 15 years of our life step by step, and it felt heavy but necessary. Monday afternoon, Noah called and said Liam's lawyer wanted to meet to discuss the settlement, and I knew this was it, the moment everything would either settle or explode. We met at Noah's office Tuesday morning, and Liam was there with his lawyer, a nervous guy in an expensive suit who kept shuffling papers like he knew they were out of moves. Sophie wasn't there, probably because she didn't want to face me after the kitchen showdown, and I was fine with that, because this was about Liam now. I sat across from him, and he wouldn't look at me, just stared at the table, and I felt this strange pang, not love, but sadness for what we'd been, before he decided to throw it all away. Noah slid the settlement terms across the table and said Liam returns $100,000, relinquishes all claims to the beach house, and Emma agrees not to pursue criminal charges for the fraudulent sale or the unauthorized transfers. Liam's lawyer whispered something to him, and I saw Liam's jaw tighten, but he didn't argue. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, "We accept the terms," and just like that, 15 years of marriage came down to a stack of papers and a signature. I signed where Noah pointed and watched Liam do the same, his hand moving slow like he was signing away more than just the house. I didn't say a word, didn't gloat, didn't feel happy, just felt this quiet resolve because I'd done what I set out to do. We left the room, and I didn't look back because there was nothing left to say. 6 months later, I'm standing in my beach house, and it's different now because I've made it mine again. I replaced the old kitchen counters with sleek quartz ones put in storm-proof windows and redid the deck where Liam used to throw his parties. It wasn't just about fixing the house, it was about wiping away the past and starting fresh. I heard through a mutual friend that Liam and Sophie opened their fitness studio in Bedford. but it's struggling, and I don't feel good about that. Just a little sad for what could have been if they'd made different choices. The divorce finalized 3 months ago, clean and quick, with the settlement terms locked in, and the $100,000 Liam returned went straight into a new commercial property in downtown Halifax, a small office building, steady tenants that's already paying off. My phone buzzed one morning, and it was Olivia Fraser, my title agent, checking in. She said, "How's the beach house holding up?" And I told her, "Better every day. Thanks for your help with the trust." She laughed and said, "That's what friends are for." Then mentioned a new investment property. She'd found something commercial with good protection like the beach house setup. I told her to send me the details because I'm always looking for the next move. After we hung up, I sat down with my coffee and thought about the last year, how Liam's call in London felt like the end of the world, but turned out to be the start of something else. I'm not going to lie and say I'm over it, because 15 years is a long time, and you don't just shrug that off. I still think about the good days, the trips we took, the plans we made, but I don't miss Liam, not the man he became. What I feel now is steady, like I've found my footing again, and that's enough. The house is just a house, wood and glass and concrete, but it's mine, and sometimes that's all you need to keep going. I finished my coffee and headed to my office because I've got a new deal closing next week, and I'm not slowing down for anyone. Not anymore.